Deadlines are interchangeable. So exam 1, quiz and assignments part 2. Deadline this Friday, March 1st, end of day. Exam 2, quiz and assignments part 3, April 6th, end of day. Exam 3, exam 4, quiz and assignments part 4, April 26th, end of day. Any citing final covering all the things. Deadlines on Wednesday, finals week at 5. And again, if you've done all 4 exams and quiz and assignments that you wish to do, and the final could not help you, then you wouldn't need to take it, because before, if you don't take something, it's already scored as a 0, so you can see your real score in the class at the moment. As mentioned before, upcoming committee meeting today goes through my office hours, so I'll be over in Allied Health and not in my office, so lots more meetings coming up, but I'll announce them as they come up. Before heading to our new stuff, picking up where we looked at 2 wrongs make a right. Anything about any previous stuff to be or stuff, it needs more stuff. It's all about this stuff. Okay, so last time we're looking at the notion of 2 wrongs make a right. And we saw with the badly drawn cartoon, the basic idea is it's this kind of bad reason. You have one person and they do something wrong. But they say, it's okay for me to do this wrong thing to them, because they would do that to me. Now, in terms of the bad reasoning, it doesn't matter whether this is true or not, because there'd be another question of would they really do that back to them? And let's just assume they would. And of course, it would still be bad reasoning, because if someone just says, it's okay for me to do something wrong to them, because they would do it to me, bad logic. Now again, there are a couple exceptions. If you have to do the potentially bad thing to defend yourself against someone doing something wrong to you, that is, say, self-defense, wouldn't be a fallacy. So if someone says, yeah, this person tried to murder me, so I had to shoot them, you know, there'd be the questions of legality and morality of the action, but it wouldn't be a fallacy, because it would be self-defense. Now, it gets a little murkier when you talk about preemptive strikes. So, you know, what countries sometimes do is they see their neighbor up to something, and they go and hit them first. And that becomes not a fallacy, but a moral debate. Was that the right thing to do? We're also talking a bit about the theories of punishment. And from the standpoint of ethics and law, we generally punish people. One is retribution, because they did something bad, they deserve it. Which wouldn't be this fallacy. It would just be, it wouldn't be I'm doing something bad to them because they do it to me. It would be I'm doing something harmful to them because they did something harmful, which is a moral dispute. Is it okay to hurt people because they've done something wrong? We also do it for rehabilitation, to make people, in theory, better. And of course, we also do it for deterrence, after they've done it. And those would be basically theories of punishment, not connected to the fallacy. So what makes the fallacy is someone says, this wrong thing I'm doing is okay because someone else would do it to me. But of course, that doesn't make it right. This is typically done when someone wants to try to justify their actions. But it can also be used, so to speak, offensively. A person would typically say to other people, I'm okay in doing this because they would have done it to me. And also when people want to assuage their guilt. So, like the example I gave, if I go and steal Dr. Owens' dinner, and I say he would do it to me, I may be doing it just so I don't feel so bad about stealing his lunch. But again, bad logic. Before pressing on to new stuff, any stuff about the bad cartoons that needs any more stuff. So this takes us to the end of chapter 6. So in terms of adding to your critical thinking toolkit to get through life more effectively, these are the things you should have in that toolkit now. Or if you prefer the metaphor of the smartphone, these are the apps that at this point should be installed. We saw the arc from outrage or appeal to anger, where someone substitutes anger in place of evidence. And the defense against that is to say, okay, this is making me angry, but is there actually a reason there? Now the defense against all of these is not to have no emotion, it's to say, I feel this, but do I have actual reasons to accept this claim? Basically pausing for a moment and kind of, achieving like a Zen moment of setting aside those feelings. In terms of the side of evil, the way to do it is get people angry and get them to accept the claim. It's an essential tool in in politics. If you're considering going to office and you're kind of evil, great thing to use. Now again, getting people angry over things that they should be angry about is a different matter. So if someone is giving a speech about terrible injustices and how wrong it is, and these things truly are terrible injustices and wrong that should be righted, that could make people angry, but they have a good reason to be angry. So what makes it a fallacy is the anger has no connection to the conclusion. Scare tactics uses fear. You try to make the audience afraid so they accept the claim. Now again, if it's something people should be afraid of, if there truly is a clear and present danger, even though people may be afraid, that would not be scare tactics. So again, using the example of someone giving a speech, if there is something truly threatening and dangerous, and someone is bringing it up saying we must act against this terrifying threat, and there really is a terrifying threat, not scare tactics, because it's got a connection between the claim presented, here's something that's going to really mess us up, therefore we should do something, and people may be scared of it, but it wouldn't be bad logic. Then we looked at pity, envy, pride, guilt, hope, and then we covered these emotional fallacies. So again, sort of the general toolkit is whenever someone's trying to manipulate your emotions to get you to accept something, you should always ask the basic question, namely, are they just trying to make me feel to get me to accept a claim, or do they have actual reasons here? And then the second question is that one of the exceptions? Then we looked at fallacies that don't rest on direct appeals to the feelings, things like peer pressure, groupthink, nationalism. These basically rest on a threat of rejection, group identity at the national level. And then we turn to ones that are based on psychology, but aren't about particular isolated emotions. These essentially are distraction tactics, essentially saying lots of people believe it, so it's true. Lots of people do it, so it's true. We've always done this, or always believed it, so it's true. A defense against these is basically to say, are these cases where belief makes it true, or cases where belief indicates truth? And if not, fallacy. In the case of appeal to common practice, the thing to sort out is it a case of someone just saying it's okay because everyone does it, or is it an appeal to fair play? So if everyone else gets treated a certain way, and someone gets treated unfairly, pointing that out wouldn't be the fallacy. Because the person is not saying, I should do this because everyone does it. It's that I should be treated like everyone else unless there's a relevant difference. They looked at rationalizing, which is someone presents credible, laudable motives in place of their true ones, and this is often self-inflicted. And then we finished up, of course, with the last one, two wrongs make a right. Before heading on our continued adventures in fallacies in Chapter 7, anything about 6 that needs more stuff? Okay. Now 7 is more fallacies. So our particular objectives here are this. We'll look at a set of fallacies, the Ad Hominems, they're all about attacking something about the person to attack their claim. And as we'll see, that's bad logic. Also, the origins of claims. One that's very popular in politics is, of course, the ones that misrepresent people's position, the classic straw man. And we'll look at the false dilemma, the slippery slope, and burden of proof, and begging the question. And these are all very powerful fallacies. If you listen to almost any heated debate on the interwebs, especially about politics, people will crank out ad hominems and using slippery slope fallacies, and so they're really fun. And they're, of course, terrible. So our first family is this, the ad hominems. And this is kind of maybe the number one weapon used on the internet for people fighting badly. And if you go to pretty much any comment section, discussion group on places like Reddit or 4chan, 80chan, or however many chans there are these days, you'll see lots of ad hominems. And people use these, of course, because they're super effective. And of course, logically, they're garbage. but in terms of getting people riled up for trolling, very effective, and in terms of their psychological impact, incredibly effective. But again, logically, nothing there at all. To use, going back to my food and flavoring analogy, this is basically really junk food, but people really gobble it up. So it's super delicious because it appeals to, well, hate. People they love to hate. So the basic idea behind all ad hominems is this. Here's the person, and they make a claim, or present an argument, position, etc. And what someone does, what makes ad hominems all the ad hominems, is instead of it going after the claim and battling the claim on its merits or demerits, they instead attack something about the person. So the person is attacked, then the claim is rejected. Now, laid out bare like that, it's pretty clear why that's bad logic. Because if you engage in a debate, and say on Reddit or something, and someone types out, "I'm attacking you as a person, therefore the claim you made is false," that would be clearly stupid. Because at the fallacies, one of the best defense against fallacies is knowing the structure. Because if you see the structure, I'm attacking you, therefore your claim is false, no one would fall for that. That would be like someone saying, "I would like you to accept this fraudulent money as real money." Well, that's not going to work. So what you have to do is present it in a way that people don't know what you're up to, but get sort of pulled into it. So what are the particular flavors of ad hominem? Well, from a practical standpoint, getting through life, you really would only need to know just that basic idea. You just ask, is the attack on something about the person, and they want me to reject the claim? In that case, you say, this is bad logic, not accepting that. But it has particular manifestations. So what are these? And they can get a little smushed together. The first one is the personal attack. And as we'll see, sometimes it's blurry between what is personal and what is circumstantial. So, and also with poison the well, sometimes we'll use the same techniques. So again, in real life it can get a little fuzzy, so the most important thing is knowing the general idea. But here are the particular varieties. So the personal attack is all about going after something about the person. So what qualities would that be? Well, roughly put, these would be qualities that are not the person's circumstances, and one rough way to sort of separate them is circumstances are kind of like what the person is in as opposed to what the person is themselves. But again, this can be kind of muddy, because you could kind of say this is stuff you can choose, kind of, and this is stuff you don't. It's kind of you. But then that breaks down really quick. So it's going after the person directly. And obvious examples of personal attacks would be attacks that are clearly very personal, like someone saying, yeah, that person says that movie should have won the Oscar, but they're kind of an idiot, so they're clearly wrong. And then just be going after the person. So saying someone is an idiot or stupid, maybe saying they're racist or something, or a snowflake or a social justice warrior, depending on the type of attack, those are all most likely personal attacks. So kind of the question would be, is this personal about the person themselves, and is it attacking them? Now the reason why this is a fallacy is because, crudely put, calling someone names and saying mean things to them doesn't prove or disprove anything. So if some politician says that someone else is, not a nice person, and they're terrible, and they're a liar, so what they're saying about climate change is untrue, that'd just be a personal attack. And even if those bad qualities were true, suppose someone was not a nice person, or an idiot, or mean, or badly dressed, or lacked fashion sense, that wouldn't disprove their claims. Kind of an easy test for this is, one that I always use, is put in an obviously true claim, and then substitute that in for the claim being attacked, and see if it would still work. For example, if someone says, yeah, this person is kind of a jerk, they're a social justice warrior snowflake, therefore their claim about equality is wrong. Well, put in a claim like 2 + 2 = 4. Yeah, this person says 2 + 2 is 4, but they're a snowflake, a social justice warrior, so they're wrong. Well, that would clearly be stupid. So if you put in a claim that's like obviously true, and then ask yourself, would that work in that case? And that kind of gives away the game. Nothing about the person changes this. And it's true for pretty much any other claim. Now, how do you use this on the offensive? And this is actually pretty evil to use. In fact, it's kind of like using poison. If you're using it, you're probably a bad person. And the idea essentially is this: know your audience. What do they hate about people? And everybody hates something. And then you go after that. And you, in some cases, kind of been pre-established. There are things about people because of their identities, etc., that are easy to go after, going back to stereotypes. So you launch the attack on the person, and then you present that their claim should be rejected. Again, you don't want to be obvious. You don't want to say, I'm calling this person an idiot, their claim is false. You want to go after them and kind of dismiss their claim. Now, if you want to see good examples of this, again, our president. He's basically an ad hominem generator, and you can go through his tweets and the people he's insulted, and those are hundreds and hundreds of examples of doing that. Now, of course, he's not the only one, but whenever whoever's president gets to be used as the examples. You can go to many other politicians and people as well. Also, of course, if you go to pretty much any comment section on the internet, YouTube, Reddit, etc., you'll see tons of these people just ripping at each other with personal attacks. Now, the side of good, again, the defense is to say, is this relevant to the claim? As I mentioned before, my sort of personal trick is say, well, let's swap in something obviously true, like 2 + 2 is 4, or triangles have 3 sides, in for that claim and see if it would disprove it. And again, the qualities of the person don't prove or disprove their claims. Now, are there not exceptions? Well, on one hand, kind of, yeah, maybe, kind of no. But here's the idea. If we go back to the ancient days of credibility, back in part 1, we saw that there are qualities a person can have that reduce or increase their credibility. So, if a person had those negative, ticks against them, they were biased, they lacked education, experience, etc., those would be things that would be reasonable to bring up. But those did not disprove their claim. Even if they're relevant to the person's qualities, it doesn't automatically disprove their claim. Why not? Well, because their claim is independent of them. So we have to carefully separate out considerations of credibility from proving or disproving claims. For example, imagine you're a judge someday in a courtroom, and the prosecutor gets up and says, that witness is a terrible person, they are mean, they kick their dog, they cheat on their taxes, they tear the tags off mattresses, they're bad hombres. Therefore, their claim against my client is a lie, filthy, filthy lie. Well, that would be irrelevant to their claim, just simply personally attacking them. But if you were in the same courtroom and one of the defense attorneys said, this witness against my client, they are biased. Here's supporting evidence showing their bias against my client. They claim they alleged to have seen my client doing this, but they weren't wearing their glasses at the time, and they clearly need glasses. We're not even sure if they really were there because the story has all kinds of holes in it. They've perjured themselves previously, therefore their testimony lacks credibility. That would be not a fallacy, because the person would be saying, this person lacks credibility, so not you shouldn't believe their claim that it's false, it's that you should not assign plausibility to their claim because they're not a credible person. So legitimate questions of credibility, going back to part 1, those aren't ad hominem, because it's not this person is wrong because they're terrible, it's this person legitimately lacks credibility, so their credibility doesn't support the claim because they don't have any of that. Now also going with positive qualities, if someone is an expert and they have education, lack of bias, etc., and you accept their claim, it wouldn't be an ad hominem either, because you're saying they're credible, they make this claim, so their claim is probably true, it's plausible. So we have to carefully separate out legitimate questions of credibility, does this person lack credibility or not, from just attacking someone. And so that's how to sort that out. Before moving away from personal attacks, anything about a personal attack that needs more personal or attack? Another classic one is the inconsistency ad hominem, known in the Latin as ad hominem to quoque, and often cast, when I first learned it, as the U2 fallacy. Not U2 like the band with Bono, or U2 like the classic spy plane, but as in you also. There are two variants on this fallacy. But the basic idea when someone uses this, what they're trying to do is say, this other person either doesn't act like their claim is true, so they're wrong, or they used to believe something else, and they believe something different now, so they're wrong now. The idea being that because they're inconsistent, they're wrong. So why do people fall for this, and what are the particular variations? Well, first, the reason why this kind of works is because it does make use of legitimate logical reasoning, which is this. One feature of claims, and it's always something that comes in pairs, is claims can be inconsistent. Consistent. Need spell check from my whiteboard. The feature is this. Two claims are inconsistent means they both can't be true at the same time. They both could be wrong, but they both can't be true. So you know at least one of them's got to be wrong. But you don't know just from knowing they can't both be true, you don't actually know which one is not true. So for example, if I claim this bottle contains pure vodka, and I claim it contains pure water, both of those can't be true, because it can't be pure vodka and pure water in one bottle. They both, of course, could be false. Maybe it's just empty. So it gets its power from inconsistency, which is a legitimate thing philosophically. If you can show these both can't be true, then they both can't be true. One of them's got to be wrong, but you don't know automatically which one. So that's where it gets its power. So it actually has like good logic fuel kind of behind it, but it's being terribly misused. So here's the first one. And this is kind of inconsistency ad hominem, classic. So what a person does is this. Here's a person, they say one thing, we'll call the claim A, but what they do is not A. They act in contrary to their claim. So they say one thing and do another. Now, on the face of it, you may think, hey, isn't that good logic? They say A, they do not A, so they're wrong about A. But the problem is that, first, their actions and their claim, what they do and what they say, one doesn't disprove the other, unless they're talking about what they're doing. And even if we somehow know that, obviously both of these can't be true, but we don't know which one is correct. So the way it works is this. If you're trying to deploy it, what you do is you point to the person who's making the claim and say, hey, your actions don't match your claim. Therefore, the claim is wrong. Now, the reason why it's a fallacy is because what I do has no connection to whether my claims are true or not. Doesn't prove or disprove anything. For example, I'll give a couple examples of this. Centuries ago, when I was in elementary school, I had to go to we had health class. And the teacher would come in and say, put up this slide of the healthy lung, smoker lung, looks like a charcoal briquette. And of course the teacher says, don't smoke, kids, it'll kill you. And immediately afterwards, of course, the teacher runs to this teacher's lounge and just chain smoking unfiltered Camels, because she was dealing with us little monsters, and she needed some drugs at that point. I remember, one of my fellow kids saying roughly, it's another adult lie, basically. They're telling us not to smoke, like they tell us not to drink or do other adult stuff, yet they're doing it themselves. So it's just a lie. Smoking is fine. It wasn't put that eloquently, but it was put in like third grade terms. Now, in terms of teaching people, yeah, it's probably not good technique to tell someone this is terrible and then just go and do that. It's a terrible role model. But what a person does, the fact that she smoked, doesn't prove that smoking is good for anybody. In fact, we know that smoking is terrible. So we could say, maybe the person is a hypocrite perhaps. They say do this and they don't do this and they do it themselves, and their actions don't match their words, but it doesn't disprove their words. There's no logical connection. Another example, back in the 90s, Bill Clinton did some commercials, I vaguely recall, about the importance of like family values. At the same time, he was family valuing with Monica Lewinsky. Now, yeah, that's inconsistent. If you say the family is super important, you should be faithful, you probably shouldn't be, doing stuff with other people. But it doesn't mean that he's wrong. In fact, he's probably right. He shouldn't have been doing that stuff, even though he was. He's just, you can say he's a hypocrite. Final example, back when I was at Ohio State as a grad student, I had two people in my ethics class who battled all the time. And they asked if they could do a battle in front of the class. I'm like, sure, go for it. And they picked treatment of animals. And so one person walks in, they're wearing leather pants, leather shirt, leather hat, leather belt, eating like a RD's, triple roast beef meat chunk. And they, of course, argue why we shouldn't eat animals, we shouldn't mistreat them, we shouldn't use them as food. The other person comes in, they get plastic flip-flops, polyester pants, polyester shirt, eating a salad. And they're arguing that not only is it okay to eat animals, we're obligated to kill and eat as many animals as possible. And of course, it was a total setup because they were waiting for the moment where someone said to them, you're wrong because you're eating meat. And you're wrong because you're eating a salad. And they just smiled and said, no, we're hypocrites. This has nothing to do with our position. And they were right. If the person sitting there arguing that animals should not be eaten between bites of the roast beef sandwich, if you're trying to persuade people, yeah, it's a terrible idea. People are going to go, you're so wrong. But, he was obviously right. It doesn't matter what a person is shoving in their face and arguing about, animal rights, whether it's a salad or a Big Mac. What matters is their argument. So if someone who's stuffing their face with an Arby's, quadruple beef, while wearing leather pants, and they say what I'm doing is terrible, they could be completely right. Now again, psychologically, you don't convince people very well if what you do doesn't match your claims. But logically, there's no connection. So from a practical standpoint, yeah, if you're arguing for animal rights, you probably don't want to be eating, a roast beef sandwich. You probably wouldn't want to be doing that. But from the standpoint of logic, no connection whatsoever. So this is a offensive fallacy. You use it to attack other people, and so what you do is they make a claim, and what you would do if you were arguing this personally, try to figure out what do they do that doesn't match that claim. Or if you're in politics, you have your minions go out and grind through like, YouTube and past records and stuff, and find things they've done that don't match those, don't match that claim. Opposition research. That can be quite effective, because psychologically, if someone makes a claim, but they show they don't seem to have gone with that, like if you have someone, like on the left, if you have someone who claims, that mistreatment of a woman is bad, and racism is bad, and they go back in their past and they find the person was like a little bit, grabby as an employer, or said some things, back in the 80s that could be seen as a bit racist, and saying, well, they're wrong now because they did stuff, they did these inconsistent things. Well, yeah, that behavior was terrible, but it doesn't prove that their claims are wrong. A person could be the worst harasser in the world and saying things like women shouldn't be harassed, it should be all equal. They're terrible people, or terrible person, but their claims are still true. Because terrible people can say true things. I mean, think of like the famous liberals have been being busted for being sexual harassers and assaulters. Yeah, they're terrible, they're horrible people. But when they said things like women should be treated equally, sexual harassment is terrible, yeah, they weren't living up to their own standards, but they were right. By their own standards, they are terrible, terrible people. Now the defense against it, again, is to ask that question. Namely, does the person's actions have any relevance to the truth of their claim? And the answer is, well, no. Now, if you're assessing someone's character, then considering what they say and what they do would be fair. So, for example, if someone's making all these claims and they don't live up to them, you can't say their claims are wrong, but it's fair to say they don't live up to their own principles. Because that wouldn't be assessing their claim, it'd be assessing them, saying they are terrible people. They don't live up to their own principles, which is a totally different matter. So on the side of evil, what you do is find something about the person that doesn't match the claim you want to attack. You rip into them, and then get people to reject their claim. So for example, when someone on the left is exposed as like having done something racist or sexist, people on the right tear into them. Not because they're devoted to social justice thing, but because they want to rip down those claims. Because they're kind of their reasoning on the extreme is, aha, this person said that sexual harassment was terrible, but they were doing it. And kind of their claim sometimes, weirdly enough, is, well, I guess it's not so bad, which is pretty weird. But it's a standard inconsistency ad hominem. If we're going to variant 2, anything about 1 that needs more stuff. Now, 2 is similar, but it has a slight variation. Instead of being about what the person does, it's about what the person said. So what a person does is this. To attack a person using version 2, they make claim A, and for whatever reason, you want to attack them and you want to reject this claim. So what you do is you would go and try to see what they've said in the past. And again, if you're in politics and you got minions, you send out your minions to do opposition research to try to find things this person said that go against their current claim. And if you do that, if you find that, what you'd say is, well, they say this now, but they said, not A back then, so they're wrong now. Now this gets its bite, its teeth, from the notion again of consistency. The claims A and not A, or these are actual contradictions, or A and B being inconsistent, yeah, if A and B can't both be true, one of them's got to be wrong. So the fallacy is not the person says, hey, the person says this and this, they can't both be true, one of them is wrong. Is the person says, hey, the person says this and this, therefore this one is definitely wrong. Because by that reasoning, doesn't follow. So yeah, it could be the case that A and B both can't be true at the same time, but you can't infer A is false or B is false. One of them's going to be wrong, possibly two, but without further evidence, you can't conclude that. So it's using some good logic, but misusing it. So what would be some examples? Well, it's usually, again, used in a weaponized way. So when people are fighting, on a personal level, they might bring up past claims to score a point or attack someone now. Or politics, very common to do this, because then you can have, if you have minions, they can grind through and find things that go against it. For example, suppose two people are having a debate over gun control, and one person, they witness all these, school shootings and you get the statistics on people committing suicide with typically handguns, gun violence, etc., and their view is there should be more gun control, universal background checks, trigger locks, etc. And suppose someone says to them, hey, 10 years ago you were against gun control, so you're wrong now. Now, logically, of course, either gun control is good or it's not. That's, A or not A. But we don't know which one is true or false just from that saying. So for the person to say, you're wrong now because you're for gun control, because you weren't in the past, bad logic. Because if this was good logic, you could never change your mind without being wrong. So to give a silly example, I used to believe in Santa Claus. Sadly, don't stop listening, kids, on YouTube. But now I don't. I still want to believe, because that'd be cool. Now, in this case, I'd kind of like it to work, because it would be, you used to believe in Santa Claus, now you don't, so Santa must exist. And I'd be fine with that. But sadly, that doesn't work. Because the mere fact that we used to believe something or claim something, and we claim something different now, yeah, one of them's got to be wrong, but it doesn't prove that the claim we're making now is wrong. A more serious example, if you've been following the nightmare that is American politics now, the Democrats and Republicans are fighting over the wall. And one thing that Republicans and Trump have brought up is that the Democrats are now saying, we're not going to give you money for your wall. And then they say the Democrats, back in the 90s when Clinton was doing his stuff, that they said the wall, the border security and walls were necessary. So what they're saying is, Democrats, you say now we don't need the wall, but back then you were for the wall, so you're wrong now. And of course that's the fallacy. It doesn't, the fact that they were for a wall then and not for a wall now doesn't mean they're wrong now. And it doesn't even mean they're being hypocrites. Why? Well, maybe things were different then. That the border, security was needed. Or maybe it's true, they were wrong then, that it was all just a political ploy, and the Democrats were using it, scoring political points by, being harsh on immigration, and now they're scoring political points by opposing it. But even if they were hypocrites, saying they were for a wall then, not for a wall now, doesn't prove the wall is a good idea. But again, it can be psychologically effective, because it's a way to attack and score political points. So on the side of evil, here's how you do it. If it's a personal fight, what you do is kind of review what the person used to think, that you recall from past discussions, and if they change their mind, attack them now for saying, hey, you're saying this now, but you used to think this, so you're wrong now. If, again, you're like in politics and you've got minions who do your work for you, you'd have them go through and scour for inconsistencies and say, they're saying this now, they said that then. In terms of defending against it, if someone's trying to use this against you, you would say, well, okay, these claims, suppose it is true that you used to believe this and you believe something different now, the defense is to say, well, this may be what I believed then, but this is what is true now. Or you can just point out the obvious that, the fact that I used to believe something else or said something else doesn't prove I'm wrong now. I could have been wrong then. Now, since both of these can't be true, I've got to be wrong about something, but it doesn't prove when I was wrong. Now, of course, in some cases, people they'll just make something up. So you also have to, of course, watch out for just straight up lies. Okay, so that's the inconsistency at home. And again, two basic flavors. One is about what a person does, and one is about what a person has said. Now, are there any kind of like exceptions to this? Well, one exception would be if instead of saying they said this and they said this, they're wrong now, if you show that a person is making claims and they both can't be true at the same time, it is fair to point out that both of these can't be true. So that would be a fair criticism, to say that not they're wrong now, but which one do they believe now? For example, suppose there's a politician who, in the past, they've argued in favor of state and local control, and they get up there and give some speech about how the federal government, the state government shouldn't be pushing around, towns and localities and county governments. Decision-making should be at the local level always. And then they come out, tomorrow and say, we've got to take away, local control over fracking and local control over guns, because, it's going to be a hodgepodge across the state. You can't allow just every little county or city to make its own decisions about these things. Now, if the criticism was they said this then and this now and they're wrong now, that would be the fallacy. It doesn't prove which one is right. But both can't be right, because the original claim is there should be local control, and their current claim is no, there shouldn't, and they both can't be true. Now, it would be fair to point out, to say to them, well, which is it? What principle does that person have? Do they believe in local control, or do they not? So it would be fair to criticize them on that ground. So if you were calling them out, to say, well, you're wrong now, fallacy. But to say, wait a minute, just yesterday you were talking about how local control is super critical and important and must never be violated, and now you're talking about how, the state government should have to decide all this stuff. Which one is correct? And that would be a fair criticism, because you're saying to the person, you're saying two things that can't both be true, so which is your actual position? And that's fair, because you're not saying they're wrong because they said something else. You're saying, what is your principle? What's your standard? What do you believe? Before pressing on, anything about that needs more stuff? Circumstantial ad hominem. Now, from a practical standpoint, as mentioned, this can get kind of mushed into personal attack, because the question would be, what is personal and what is a person's circumstances? And one kind of way to do it is, I guess, personal qualities be things that it's like what you are, and circumstances are kind of like your context. Like, for example, like a person's religion would be a matter of choice, because even though a person may be born into it and might get raised that way, they can decide, do I want to keep on being Episcopalian or not? Political parties. Again, a person may be brought up to be like Republican, but they can change that to Democrat or Independent or Anarchist or whatever. Now, probably the clearest way to present this fallacy, and kind of my preferred way of doing it, takes us back to part one, and it does get some actual bite from this consideration. And here's a consideration. You might recall from the ancient days of part one that when considering someone's credibility, it is fair to consider someone's bias. Because if a person has a bias about something that would lead them to accept or reject a claim, it's fair to consider that when assessing their credibility. So if I'm saying something and I have like a lot at stake, one way or another in this claim, it's reasonable to say, to consider, maybe I'm biased. Maybe I shouldn't be the person to go through to get information from them. I mean, for example, if you have someone who claims that climate change is not real, and you see they're funded by oil companies, then you might say, they could be biased. Or if you have someone who says climate change is super real, we got to act immediately with all these, renewable energy, and they're getting paid by the renewable energy lobby, then you should also be suspicious as well, because they've got, bias. Now, where the fallacy becomes the fallacy is when someone says, this person has this circumstance. And again, the clearest example is they're in a circumstance that biases them, and their inference is not their credibility is lower, it's that their claim must be false. So the mistake being made here is not they're in these circumstances, it's relevant to the claim, therefore their credibility is lower. It's that they're in these circumstances, their claim is false. And it may seem like a subtle difference, but it's actually a pretty big difference, because one is they have these circumstances relevant to the claim, credibility lower. Like, for example, if I tell you climate change is super real and we have to act immediately with solar power, and you find out I'm getting, checks are being cut to me from the solar power industry, doesn't mean I'm wrong, but you'd be right to consider me less credible, because I have something to gain by saying that. Now, if someone says, aha, he's being paid by the solar industry, so his claim is wrong, we don't need renewable energy, climate change is a lie, that would be this fallacy. Or as another example, if someone says climate change is not true, and you find out they're being paid by oil companies, then if you were to say, aha, they're wrong, fallacy. If you were to say, they're getting paid by these oil companies, so their credibility is lower, that would be fine. Other examples, outside of politics, suppose you have a town meeting, and one person gets up, and they're considering, whether the city should put more of a tax on local businesses. And somebody gets up and says, well, this tax revenue may be helpful to the city in some ways, but if there's more taxes, small business owners can't hire as many employees, which means that there's less money in the community, there's less spending, and ultimately that's worse off. So although it may seem like we'd make more money with a tax on a small business, we'd actually make less money because we'd have less employees and the community would be worse off. Therefore, we shouldn't have this small business tax. Now, if someone gets up and says, oh, they're saying that because they own that little business down on the side of the road, so they're wrong, that'd be the fallacy. The fact that they have a stake in it doesn't prove they're wrong. Now, well, if you find out they do have a small business, you'd want to put that in your credibility bin to say, they're not objective, so I should be suspicious. But again, it doesn't prove they're wrong. Or another example, if someone gives an impassioned speech, about abortion being immoral, and you find out they're a Catholic priest, and someone says, well, they're wrong because they're Catholic, well, that would be a fallacy. If someone says, oh, they gotta believe, they probably believe that because of their religion, so you put that in the bias box. But again, someone's circumstances doesn't disprove their claim. It can impact their credibility. Now, on the positive side, if someone has good circumstances, like we saw, if someone is, say, an expert in climate science, they're at MIT, they've written 133 papers on climatology, and all the experts in the field say, yeah, this person is honest and they're sharp and they're good, she's great. In that case, it doesn't prove their claim is true, but it greatly enhances their credibility. So we have to separate out credibility fights from rejecting or accepting claims. Before going to our last one, the poisoning of the well, anything about this? So again, on the side of evil, here's how to use it. You take someone's circumstances, like they have something to gain, or they're of this religion or this political party, attack that, and then reject their claim. So it's about their circumstances. And the defense again is to say, well, is this a credibility assessment, or is it just circumstance, claim is false? In that case, not a good argument at all. Now, our last one is kind of a preemptive ad hominem. What defines these other three, it's always the person has made the claim, and the claim they made is being attacked because something about them. In the case of poisoning the well, the essential feature, the thing to look for in terms of assignments, quizzes, and tests, is this feature. So here's the person, and they haven't said anything yet in terms of the claim being attacked. The claim is in the future. They will make this claim, or some claim. So what a person does is, the reason why I call it a preemptive ad hominem, because they attack the person now. It could be a personal attack, inconsistency attack, circumstantial attack type of deal, however they're attacked, but there's some attack on the person. But what makes it poison the well is that they're not saying reject the claim they've made. The idea is that the person hearing this will reject some future claim. So the idea is, crudely put, it's here's an attack on this person, therefore you should not believe their next claim, or their claims they're going to make. Now again, if laid out bare like that, like if someone was giving a speech and said, my opponent is a bad person, therefore don't believe the next thing they say, well, that would kind of give it away. Most people would not fall for that. But the idea is basically attack them in the hopes of poisoning that well. So where does this name come from? Well, metaphorically, here's the idea. It was developed long ago, and it's one of the earliest forms of basically biological warfare. And biological warfare, of course, is when you kill or harm people by using biological weapons. Things like germ, bacterial and viral warfare, etc. Now back in the way back, people didn't know about bacteria, so they didn't know how to build anthrax bombs or flu bombs or something. But they made the connection pretty quick that a rotting carcass, if you got it in the water, that you'd get sick. They didn't know why, they just knew it worked. And so one technique that people developed was you put a carcass, like a sheep or cow or something, weight it down with stones, drop it in the village well. And then people will drink the water, and they get, all kinds of bacteria, and they get sick and possibly die. And of course another technique is to poison, put smallpox on blankets and distribute them to people, and they get smallpox and die. Now in this case, you're not literally poisoning your opponent, sneaking up to their water bottle and putting poison in it. It's metaphorical poison. In this metaphor, the person is the well, and the attack against them is the poison. So the idea is that whatever else they say, people will already be poisoned against them. So their claims will be tainted by this attack. So the idea is basically you'd use this if the person hasn't already said something you want to attack, and what you do. Good examples would be if you're in a debate and you're going first. And you don't know for sure what they're going to say, so you want to pre-poison them. Or another example, if you're on a talk show and you're talking first, you're not sure what the other person's going to say, so you go after them. And so usually the way you'd use this is you don't know exactly what they're going to say, but you want to pre-poison them. Now you can combine these together. You could, use ad hominems against what they've said, and then for good measure throw some poison in that well, so whatever else they say gets poisoned. For example, a person may be giving a speech, talking about their position, and say, I will close by saying that my opponent is not a true American, and whatever they say is not in the best interest of this country, because I love America, apple pie, baseball, and of course my opponent loves none of these things. They hate apple pie, they hate baseball, and they hate America. And of course I haven't attacked any claim they've made, but my hope is that when the person starts talking, people will think about how much that person, as I've said, hates apple pie, hates baseball, and hates America. Now, of course, you can also use it, in a personal context. So, if someone doesn't like someone, they're trying to, poison other people's minds against them, they can, whisper gossip about them, say, oh, that person, they're so terrible, they do all these terrible things, blah, blah, blah. And so whatever the person says then gets poisoned. So on the side of evil, here's the scenario. for whatever reason, politics, personal pettiness, hatred, office politics, personal politics, whatever reason one might have, you want people to reject that person's claims, to not trust them, not believe them, dislike them. So what you do, but they haven't said something yet, so what you do is you attack them. You know, try to set it up that they're a liar, that they're disgusting, that they're perverted, that they're terrible, terrible people. And the idea, of course, is when the person starts talking, if you pre-poison them, people aren't going to believe them. It's kind of like, to use a kind of crude example, it's kind of like when you have two kids and one of them's like done something wrong, and they'll try to like say, Mom, Billy's a liar. He's gonna lie, because the idea is so that Mom won't believe that when Billy says that Sally broke the vase, and that's like an early attempt at poisoning the will. Now the defense against it is to say, okay, that person said terrible things about that person, but is their claim still true or not? So the side of evil, poison the person, say terrible things about them, and then hope that people will reject their claims. And the defense is to say, well, this person said bad things said about them, that they're terrible, they're awful, they're a liar, they're pervert, or whatever, but is that actually true, which is a fair point? And even if it is, there's still the question of, is their claim correct? Because even terrible people say true things. It's especially effective in court. So if anybody is considering a career in law, what you kind of want to do, until the judge shuts it down, is you kind of want to poison the opposing witnesses. Try to get out there that they're terrible, and the jury will have that in mind. Now, of course, a judge will often say, tell the jury, ignore that. But of course, once the jury's heard it, they can't erase it from their brain. So part of one tactic in the court of law is getting things out there that even if the judge says, ignore that or strike that, then you've still got them out there. Because it's in large part a psychological battle. And using fallacies is actually a very effective way to win in law, weirdly enough. Now, one variation on this is, that can be weirdly effective, is instead of attacking the person, deny stuff. So for example, a person might say, oh, despite what you've heard, I'm pretty sure this person hasn't been stealing from the university. Or, despite what you might have heard, I'm really sure this person is not a liar and has not assaulted people in the office. And the idea is that someone thinks, why are they denying this? Oh, there must be something there. So kind of a weird but effective technique is to make the point of denying something terrible about somebody, because then people think, they're denying this, maybe there's something to it, so I probably shouldn't believe them. And of course, the safety feature is, if the person comes to you and say, hey, what were you saying? And you say, I was saying you weren't a thief. And so what are they going to do? What can they do? You were saying they weren't a terrible person. So you can attack someone by denying that they're terrible, which is kind of bonus points for extra clever evil. Okay, so that takes us through those ad hominems. Before moving on, anything about the ads or the homonyms that needs more stuff? Now, with the upcoming election, it's only hundreds and hundreds of days away. Actually, we're already seeing this now. When you see the ads on both sides, you'll see a lot of this stuff. And the thing to do is ask, well, are these just ad hominems, or is there something there? Now, a closely related fallacy is the genetic fallacy. And the genetic fallacy is this. It's similar to the ad hominem with the following difference. In terms of sorting them out as a practical matter, again, if you're just trying to get through life and say, is this bad logic or not, then you really don't need to have memorized the particular subcategories. Again, if you're looking at a political ad and you're not sure, is this a personal attack or circumstantial, the important thing to know is that's an ad hominem. Whatever type it is, bad logic. Same with genetic fallacy. it's essentially similar, but here's the difference. With an ad hominem, in the very strict sense, it's always about attacking something about a particular individual. Because literally ad hominem means against the man, or if you want to be non-sexist, against the person. So one way to remember it is the definition. It's literally against a person. Now, what if the attack is on like a group, as opposed to just a particular person? Well, in that case, it'd be the genetic fallacy, which is this. Genetic fallacy is the view that something about the origin of a claim, where it comes from, discredits, disproves the claim itself. That here's where the claim came from, therefore the claim is false. Now, as you might imagine, in a way, ad hominems, you could kind of stick them under genetic fallacy, because it's about, something about the origin of the claim. But we want to make the distinction between attacks on a particular individual versus attacks on, in this case, groups. So kind of the way to sort them out, in terms of sorting them for assignments, tests, etc., is this. If it's an attack on a person, for example, Ted says that reducing taxes helps business, but Ted's a Republican, so he's wrong. Well, that would be an ad hominem, circumstantial. What if someone says, the Republicans say that reducing taxes, helps business, but they're wrong because they're Republicans? Well, it's not going after any particular person, it's going after Republicans. And since it's a group, that would be genetic fallacy. So kind of the giveaway is, if it's like going after like a named target, a particular individual, or just a single target, ad hominem, literally against the person. If it's going after a group, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, snowflakes, social justice warriors, white nationalists, whatever group you're going after, that would be genetic fallacy, because it's, this group says it, therefore it's wrong because that group is terrible. And that would be genetic fallacy. So again, kind of the rule of thumb is if you're going through like an assignment or a quiz and you're like, okay, there's an attack going on here, but ad hominem or not, well, if it's going after a particular person, like it says like the mayor, Ted, Sally, then ad hominem. If it's about a group, then genetic fallacy. But what if it's about a person being in a group and they're being attacked for being in that group? Still ad hominem. So if it's, like my example before, Sally says that there should be lower taxes on business, but she's wrong because she's a Republican, it's going after her because she's a Republican. If someone says, the Republicans say you should lower taxes to help business, but they're wrong because they're Republicans, genetic fallacy, because it's going after the group and not a person because they're in the group. Now, another variation on this is to go literally with the origin of the thing. You may wonder, why is this called genetic fallacy? Is it about genes? Well, it's actually about Genesis, which is, of course, what? No, a book of the Bible, but it's a book of the Bible about what? The beginning of stuff, in the beginning. So the genesis of a thing is where it originated, where it came from. And so, if someone attacks like a claim, a practice, etc., by saying, aha, there's some defect in where it came from, therefore it's false, that would be this fallacy. Because the criticism is, it comes from here, that's its origin, therefore it's wrong. For example, one attack that atheists often use on religious beliefs is to say, religion, it originated in non-scientific, superstitious times. You really can't blame people back then because they didn't know about science, and they were ignorant and foolish, and they believed in gods and stuff. But of course now we know better, so it's got to be wrong. So the person saying is, people believe in religion because they were ignorant and stupid, so that's where it came from, so it's wrong. And that, of course, would be a fallacy, because it's saying it comes from like a time when people didn't have science, therefore it's not true. And that doesn't follow. So if it's going after a group or where something came from, like in terms of its historical origin, etc., those would be genetic fallacies. So in terms of using them, basically what you do is this. If you don't like a claim and want to reject it, you would just go after the source. The political party, the religious group, the newspaper, the historical origin, and say it's defective now. One common use of this technique is to go back into a group's history and find some legitimate defect. One way to do this kind of like with an honest dishonesty is to go back into a group's history, find something terrible, and say therefore their claims are wrong now. For example, one of the battles, of course, in American politics is over racism. Which party is like racist? And of course, Democrats often accuse Republicans, Trump especially, being racist. And one interesting tactic that I've seen people use, like on my own, I read a terrible blog, don't never read it, is one thing that people do is they'll say, oh, the Democrats, they used to be racist. Many Klansmen were Democrats in the old South. Therefore, today, the Democrats are also racist. Their claims are wrong. Now, of course, it is true, historical fact, if you go back, Democrats of the past in the South, super racist. Republicans, of course, party of Lincoln, they were the abolitionist, party. But of course, is that true today? Are Democrats super racist today? Well, some are, clearly. But is that true today? No, because if you look at the Southern tragedy, today's Democrats are in a way yesterday's Republicans, and today's Republicans are yesterday's Democrats. So yeah, it's true. It is factually true. The Democrats used to be a super racist party, Ku Klux Klan members or Democrats, etc. But of course, that's not true now. So people say, yeah, the Democrats used to be, the Klan used to be Democrats, so they're wrong today. Well, yeah, it's true that one time, but historically, there's a lot of difference between now and then. So, or similarly on good claims. Republicans often try to defend, like today, saying we can't be racist because we're the party of Lincoln. But of course, that's not legitimate either, because what is true now need not be true then. So defects in the past don't prove defects now, and good things in the past don't prove good things now, because what's now is now. Yeah, the Democrats can't ignore the fact that's part of their party history, but just because they were terrible then doesn't mean they're terrible now. So, genetic fallacy and terribleness. Before going to this, our last bits for today, anything about the stuff so far? Needs more stuff. Now, one interesting variation on the ad hominem is the positive ad hominem. Now, the negative ad hominems, which you looked at, are all about attacks and rejecting. But not surprisingly, psychologically, people can do kind of the opposite, can kind of reverse the polarity. And so in this case, this would be the fallacy. Person makes a claim, and instead of attacking the person, saying they have all these terrible qualities or circumstances, what a person does is they say this claim is true because this person has qualities that they like, positive qualities. So if a person says, for example, use a real example, if someone says, well, this person's going to be telling the truth about this because I looked them right in the eye, they had a firm handshake, and I'm sure their claim is true. Now, going after someone's negative qualities doesn't just prove their claim, and as you might imagine, praising them, laying in a positive qualities, doesn't mean their claim is true, because reversing the polarity doesn't suddenly make it true. Now, the reason why this works psychologically is because if people have features we like and admire personally, we tend to believe them. We find them more appealing, and we tend to say, oh, I really like this person, so I believe their claim. Now, part of the psychology can often be trust. Namely, if you trust the person, you'll probably believe their claims. Now, even in that positive case, where you think the person is, they're not a liar, they're honest, they could still be wrong. I've known people who've totally sincerely and honestly, with my best interest at heart, have told me things that are totally not true. Not because they're malicious, but because they are just wrong and they don't know they're wrong. For example, I remember someone, I had wicked knee problems. My knee's like massive scar tissue and rage. And someone had suggested to me wearing copper, because they said copper will heal, those sorts of problems. And they were totally sincere and honest, not trying to deceive me, not trying to sell me anything. But of course, they were totally wrong. Copper doesn't do. I wish it were true. If that were true, I would tape pennies all over my knee. I just fill my bathtub with pennies and lay there in the pennies, the healing power of the copper. But sadly, it doesn't do that. Wish it did, but it doesn't. And again, the person was totally sincere and honest, but they were totally wrong, because their nice, caring qualities had nothing to do with their claim being true. I mean, they weren't lying, because they were saying something untrue, but they totally believed it. So, if someone has qualities we really like and admire, and we say, well, they're saying something true, doesn't follow. The truth that falls to their claims has nothing to do with those nice qualities. Someone could be kind and honest and generous and still be totally wrong. Now, what about the credibility thing? Well, this takes us back to the ancient days of part 1. If the positive qualities that you're referencing are relevant to authority and credibility, like if you say, this person's unbiased, educated, experienced, has a solid reputation, their claims match the consensus of other experts, therefore their claim is plausible, that's fine. So if you go to like your doctor and you say, and your doctor says, well, you got this knee problem, but here are, 4 exercises you can do to strengthen your knee so you have less problems. Here's 10 ways to stretch to strengthen your knee. This will do it. And you believe them because they're a doctor, they've done research, they've got a good reputation. Everyone says, yeah, this person's great. I got my knee injury, and they got me on this program of physical therapy and stuff, and it worked great. In that case, wouldn't be this fallacy, because you're not saying, ooh, I like the qualities of this person, so their claim is true. It's, this person is a credible expert, they're speaking in their field, their claim is probably true. So we always want to separate out credibility assessment from attacking the person or praising the person. And again, people we like and have all kinds of awesome qualities can be totally wrong. Again, they're not being malicious, they're just in error about their beliefs. Okay, before finishing for today, anything about this stuff? Okay, the prelude to our next episode, we're looking at the classic straw man, which is a fallacy super popular in politics, and as we'll see, it's when you present a distorted or exaggerated version of a person's position and attack that. So in our next exciting episode, the straw man. Or straw person, not to be sexist.